When Marissa Delaney finally admitted to herself that her husband, Ethan, had crossed a line she could never forgive, it wasn't after a dramatic discovery or an explosive confrontation. It was on a quiet Tuesday morning, while she was watering the lemon tree on their tiny apartment balcony, when she realized she no longer recognized the man she had promised to grow old with. For months she had been telling herself that the late-night work calls, the sudden obsession with going to the gym, and the extra cologne before leaving the house were just signs of stress, maybe even midlife panic. But she never imagined he would turn that panic into betrayal. Marissa had been raised by a single mother who drilled into her that stability mattered more than anything else. And so she always tried to keep peace, to smooth every wrinkle in her marriage, to assume the best even when the evidence lapped at her feet like an incoming tide. But when a tide rises long enough, it eventually drowns what it touches. It started with an email she wasn't supposed to see. Ethan had left his laptop open one morning while rushing to a meeting, and a notification pinged from a woman named Kay. The subject line read, "Last night was perfect." It felt like a punch to the ribs. She didn't open it right away. She simply stared at the words until her vision blurred, wishing for some explanation that wouldn't destroy her life. But when she finally clicked it, her hands trembling, the truth burst open like a grenade. Romantic lines, memories of shared hotel rooms, secret weekends, and one question that made her stomach twist. Did she suspect anything? Marissa didn't scream. She didn't cry. Instead, a cold, steady clarity washed over her. She spent the rest of the day pretending nothing was wrong. She made dinner. She sat beside Ethan on the couch. She listened to him talk about his boring office politics, amazed at how effortlessly he lied. She learned something new that night. Betrayal doesn't always feel like fire. Sometimes it feels like ice settling behind your ribs. But instead of confronting him immediately, Marissa did something Ethan never expected. She waited. She watched. She gathered details quietly, like a detective in her own home. His lover's name was Kendra Moran, a coworker from the firm. They had been seeing each other for nearly a year. A year spent sleeping in the same bed with him, cooking for him, believing his excuses, trusting him blindly. Yet she kept moving calmly, because she knew exactly what she wanted, an exit that didn't leave her broken. So she studied him carefully, taking mental pictures of his habits, his patterns, the exact moments he slipped out to make calls, the lies he repeated so often he no longer realized they were lies. The hurt didn't fade, but something else grew beside it. Resolve. Her therapist once told her that people reach a breaking point long before they act on it. She understood that now. She had already reached hers. She had just been too afraid to look directly at it. The life she built with Ethan wasn't the life she wanted anymore. She felt foolish for staying, foolish for believing he loved her the way she had loved him, foolish for accepting crumbs when she deserved whole meals. She crafted her plan slowly, deliberately. There would be no screaming match, no tears, no begging him to choose her. That version of her had died the moment she read that email. What remained was a quieter, stronger woman, one who realized that sometimes the only way to reclaim your dignity is to walk away before they even realize they're losing you. Over the next few weeks, she began boxing up the things that were truly hers: her journals, her childhood photos, a quilt her grandmother had made, small pieces of her identity she didn't want trapped in a home that had become a lie. Ethan seemed too wrapped up in his affair to notice anything unusual. If anything, he was more relaxed, more distracted, even happy. It was almost comical. She would watch him smiling at his phone and think, "You don't even know you're losing me." Her best friend, Nadia, was the only person she confided in. Nadia offered her spare room without hesitation. When Marissa showed her the email, Nadia asked only one question: "Do you want revenge or a clean break?" Marissa answered honestly, "Both." But revenge didn't mean shouting or exposing him. No. She wanted him to feel the emptiness he had created, wanted him to come home one day expecting the woman he took for granted to still be there, and instead find only silence. She imagined him standing in the doorway of their apartment, calling her name, checking the bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom, realizing the drawers were empty, the closet bare, the life he once had packed neatly into boxes and gone. She wanted that moment to hit him like a brick to the chest. So she waited for the right day. And when that day arrived, it was almost poetic. Ethan claimed he had a late client dinner, a lie that didn't even bother her anymore. The moment the door shut behind him, she grabbed the boxes she had stored in her car, filled the last of her belongings, left her wedding ring on the dining table, and stepped out of the apartment for the final time. She locked the door gently, the way you close a chapter you no longer wish to read. What Marissa didn't know yet, what she couldn't possibly predict, was that her departure wasn't the end of the unraveling. Ethan's carefully constructed double life was about to collapse in a way she never could have orchestrated, and soon she would learn that leaving wasn't just an escape. It was the beginning of a truth far darker than his affair. When Marissa woke up the next morning in Nadia's guest room, she expected a wave of regret to hit her, some crushing sense of loss or panic. But instead there was only quiet relief and a strange lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. She checked her phone expecting missed calls or frantic messages from Ethan, but there was nothing, not even a confused "where are you?" which told her everything she needed to know. He hadn't been home yet. She imagined him waking up in some hotel room beside Kendra, thinking his lies were still intact. She didn't want him to find out immediately. She wanted the silence to linger just long enough to make him question himself and then hit him all at once. By noon she finally got her first message from him. It wasn't an apology or concern. It was a casual "Hey, are you running errands? I can't find your car." She stared at the text and let out a humorless laugh. Even in betrayal he was clueless. She didn't reply. An hour later another message came. "Where are you? Did you take some of your stuff?" Then a call, then another, then a string of messages that grew increasingly irritated, not worried. He didn't ask if she was safe. He wanted to know why she was inconveniencing him. But she stayed silent. She wanted him to experience the one thing he always assumed he was immune to: being ignored. By late evening he had resorted to anger, demanding she stop playing games, which only confirmed what she had always known. Ethan didn't see her as a person, just a fixture in his life that was supposed to stay put. What she didn't expect was the message that arrived at midnight from an unknown number. Is this Marissa? She debated ignoring it, but curiosity tugged at her. She replied with a cautious, "Who is this?" The answer came quickly. "My name is Ryan. I'm Kendra's husband." The shock felt like someone yanked the floor from beneath her. She had known Kendra was cheating with Ethan, but she had assumed it was just some office flirtation turned affair, not a married woman colluding in the destruction of two homes. Before she could even respond, Ryan sent another message. "I think we need to talk. I think your husband has been seeing my wife." She stared at the screen, stunned that Kendra's husband had somehow found her number. She agreed to a call, more out of a need for clarity than anything else. When his voice came through the line it sounded tired, worn out, the way hers would have if she hadn't already drained herself emotionally. He explained that he had been suspicious for months. Kendra had become distant, protective of her phone, and constantly making up excuses for late-night work emergencies. He hadn't had proof until the night before. She hadn't come home. Not all night. She walked in at 7 in the morning wearing the same clothes she had left in, smelling like cologne he didn't own. When he confronted her she admitted nothing, only claiming she fell asleep at a coworker's place after drinks. But he knew. He searched her phone while she showered and found the same name Marissa had seen in her own nightmare: Ethan. It turned out the two cheaters weren't nearly as careful as they thought. Ryan had copied down Ethan's contact information, then dug until he found the emergency contact listed on a shared fitness app Kendra used. It was Marissa's number. That was when everything clicked. Marissa didn't cry during the call. She had already used up all her tears weeks before, but she felt something new: vindication. She wasn't crazy. She hadn't failed. She had been deceived by two people who didn't deserve the comfort of either of their marriages. Ryan asked if they could meet, not for revenge, but to compare timelines, to see exactly how deep the betrayal went. They met the next day at a small cafe in the corner booth where no one would bother them. Seeing him in person made everything even more real. He wasn't angry or dramatic. He just looked exhausted, like a man who had been fighting a silent war alone. They talked for almost 2 hours. Every date, every lie, every missing evening matched perfectly. They realized their spouses had been using conferences, work trips, and even family emergencies as cover. There was one detail that made Marissa's stomach twist. 2 months earlier, when Ethan had begged her not to visit her mother during her hip surgery, claiming he needed her at home that week, he had actually spent those nights in a rented Airbnb with Kendra. That was when something inside her hardened permanently. Ethan hadn't just cheated, he had manipulated her into abandoning someone she loved to make room for his affair. The cruelty of that hit her in a way that cheating itself hadn't. They parted ways with a promise to keep each other informed of anything new, though neither of them knew what new meant yet. That evening Ethan showed up at Nadia's door. He must have found her location through her shared friends list or by guessing, because he pounded on the door like a man trying to break through. Nadia handled it with more composure than Marissa expected. She opened the door only enough to tell him that Marissa didn't want to talk. But Ethan pushed, demanding that she come out, demanding explanations, demanding to know why she ran away like a child. Nadia shut the door in his face. After several minutes of shouting and threats to fix this right now, he finally left, but not before yelling something that made the hairs on Marissa's arms rise. "You don't know what you're doing. You're ruining something good, something good." The words were so absurd, so delusional, she almost laughed. She didn't reply to him that night, but the uneasiness didn't fade. She couldn't forget the tone in his voice, like he still believed he had control over her, like leaving him was a temporary tantrum she'd eventually apologize for. What she didn't know yet was that Ethan wasn't done lying, not to her, not to Kendra, not even to Ryan. And soon she would learn that the man she left wasn't just unfaithful. He was unraveling, desperate, and willing to twist the truth into any shape he needed to make himself the victim. And that desperation was about to expose something she hadn't seen coming at all. 2 days passed without a single word from Ethan, and the silence was almost suspicious. Marissa expected more door pounding, more calls, more guilt-tripping about how she had overreacted, but nothing came, not even a passive-aggressive text. She told herself it didn't matter anymore, but deep down she knew Ethan wasn't the type to let go quietly. She had lived with him long enough to recognize that calm from him wasn't calm at all, it was calculation. Meanwhile, Ryan kept her updated on his side. Kendra had suddenly become panicked, demanding to know if he had spoken to anyone, asking if he had gone through her phone, insisting that everything he saw was taken out of context. It was obvious she was scrambling, not out of remorse, but out of fear her affair was slipping out of her control. Then, on the third morning, Nadia shook Marissa awake with her phone in hand and panic in her eyes. "You need to see this," she said. Marissa blinked herself awake and grabbed the phone. It was a social media post, Ethan's. A long, dramatic message plastered over a photo of him looking disheveled and heroic, like a man surviving a tragedy. The caption read, "My wife abandoned our marriage without explanation. I'm devastated and trying to hold myself together. If anyone has seen her or knows she's safe, please reach out. I'm terrified something happened to her." Marissa felt heat rise to her face, not from shame but rage. She wasn't missing. She hadn't disappeared. She had left him because he'd been lying for a year. And now he was trying to weaponize public sympathy to paint her as unstable, maybe even mentally unwell. The comments were worse. People who had never met her called her selfish, heartless, cruel. Some accused her of cheating. Others speculated she was having a breakdown. Ethan's relatives flooded her phone with calls demanding she come home and stop torturing him. She was stunned at how quickly he had rewritten the narrative. It was a level of manipulation she hadn't expected but suddenly recognized he had always been good at twisting reality. But now he was performing for an audience. She didn't respond publicly. She refused to feed his spectacle, but she knew she couldn't stay silent forever because Ethan was escalating. Ryan texted her 10 minutes later with a screenshot from Kendra's private account, where she had posted something even more unhinged. "Please keep Ethan in your prayers," she wrote. "He's going through something unimaginable. Some people walk out on marriages for selfish reasons, and it leaves innocent people shattered. Innocent people. Innocent." Marissa felt nauseous. They were not content with cheating. They were rewriting themselves as victims of her leaving. But the next message from Ryan was what made her stomach actually drop. "He contacted my parents," Ryan wrote. "Told them you and I are having an affair and ran away together." Marissa nearly dropped her phone. Ethan had invented a whole new betrayal to frame himself as wronged. In one swoop he had painted her as unfaithful and painted Ryan as the villain who stole another man's wife. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so dangerous. She suddenly understood the scale of his delusion. Ethan wasn't just covering his tracks, he was creating new ones, inventing stories to distract from the truth. And then Nadia asked the question that changed everything. If he's lying like this now, what else has he lied about? It was an innocent question, but it felt like someone had opened a locked door in Marissa's mind. What if the cheating wasn't the only secret? What if Ethan's lies didn't start with Kendra? What if the life she lived with him had been built on layers of deception she hadn't even discovered yet? Later that afternoon, Ryan called her and told her something that confirmed her new fear. "I dug further," he said. "I checked their old messages, the deleted ones. They go back to years. Not 1, to years. 24 months of betrayal, not 12. Ethan had been lying to her the entire time. He pretended they were rebuilding their marriage after his job loss. The time she had picked up extra shifts, supported him financially, encouraged him while he claimed to be finding himself. He had found himself in someone else's bed. But it wasn't just the duration that shook her, it was the content. Ryan sent her screenshots, and what she saw made her chest tighten. Ethan hadn't just been unfaithful, he had been cruel behind her back. He had mocked her, calling her clingy, boring, a nag, telling Kendra he only stayed with Marissa because she made life easier. He joked about her dreams, her insecurities, things she had once trusted him with. And worst of all, she saw a message where he wrote, "She won't leave. She doesn't have it in her." That was the moment something inside her snapped in a way that felt final, irreversible. Ethan didn't just cheat, he built an entire identity around belittling her. He believed she was weak. He believed she would never walk away. He believed she didn't have the courage to reclaim her life. He believed she was trapped, but she wasn't. She had left. And the fact that she had left was now the one thing capable of ruining him in the way he had never seen coming. Later that night, Nadia got another knock on the door, but this time it wasn't Ethan, it was someone worse. It was Ethan's sister, Jenna, a woman who had always despised Marissa for reasons she never disclosed. Jenna barged into the apartment claiming she was retrieving Ethan's things because he wasn't in a stable condition to do it himself. But then she dropped a bombshell that made Marissa's blood run cold. "You need to go back," Jenna hissed. "You don't understand what you've started. Ethan is unraveling, and if he goes down, you're going down with him." It was a threat, a real one. And Marissa realized in that moment that Ethan wasn't just lying, he was hiding something serious, something big enough that his family was terrified of it being exposed. And now that she had left him, now that she was no longer under his roof, now that she wasn't under his control, the truth he had been protecting was at risk. But she had no idea yet that the secret Ethan had been hiding would make the cheating look like a minor offense. Because the real betrayal, the one she hadn't uncovered yet, was about to hit her with a force she wasn't prepared to survive. Marissa didn't sleep that night. Jenna's words replayed in her mind like a warning siren she couldn't turn off. "If he goes down, you're going down with him." What did that even mean? How could Ethan's downfall possibly take her with him unless he had done something involving her, something that went beyond lies and cheating? She lay awake staring at the ceiling in Nadia's dimly lit guest room, thinking about every strange moment in her marriage. Every unexplained withdrawal from their joint account. Every time Ethan claimed he was handling something and told her not to worry. She had brushed off those things before, trusting he was stressed or embarrassed or simply trying to protect his pride. But now they felt like clues to a far bigger puzzle. By morning, she was done speculating. She needed answers. She needed the truth, not assumptions. She needed to know what exactly she had been married to. She started by calling the bank, pretending it was a routine inquiry. The representative sounded confused when she mentioned a specific savings account Ethan had always told her was for emergencies. There was no such account. Never had been. Her pulse quickened. She asked about 2 other accounts he had insisted were in her name as well, ones she had never accessed directly. The representative apologized politely but confirmed that neither account existed. That meant Ethan had been lying about their finances for years. Worse, he had been using her name, her income, her trust as shields to cover whatever he had been doing behind closed doors. But that still wasn't enough to explain Jenna's threat. Financial lies were damaging, yes, but not dangerous enough to pull someone else down with you unless they involved something illegal. Marissa felt nausea crawl through her as the possibility took shape. She grabbed her laptop and began searching through old tax documents, something she had always let Ethan handle. He claimed it was easier since he was more organized, but as she clicked through the digital files, she froze. The last 3 years of tax returns had been filed under both their names, but the income numbers listed for her were inflated massively. According to the returns, she was making nearly double what she actually earned. And the only reason she recognized it was because the inflated amount matched a mysterious deposit she had once asked Ethan about years ago. One he brushed off as a work bonus. Now she realized that wasn't a bonus at all. It was laundered income, and he had funneled it through her identity. Her hands shook. This wasn't infidelity anymore. This was fraud. Real, felony-level fraud. And she had been unknowingly attached to it on paper. Suddenly Jenna's threat made perfect sense. If Ethan was exposed, she would be pulled into the investigation automatically because her name was on everything. Her leaving him hadn't just ruined his false narrative, it had jeopardized the structure he used her to maintain. She needed to call someone. Not Ethan, not Jenna, not even her mother. She called Ryan. When he answered, she didn't even say hello, she just told him everything she had uncovered. Every number, every false document, every detail that pointed to Ethan using her as a financial shield. Ryan didn't sound shocked. He sounded resigned, like he had expected something huge to surface. Then he told her something she wasn't ready for. Marissa, Ethan reached out to me last night. Her pulse hammered. Why? She whispered. He said you were blaming me for your disappearance, Ryan continued. He told me you were emotionally unstable. He told me you were on medication. He told me you might try to fabricate stories because you couldn't handle the divorce. Marissa's stomach twisted. Ethan wasn't just lying publicly, he was preparing a foundation to discredit her. If anything came out about the finances, he would claim she was the unreliable one, the one who made mistakes, the one who misunderstood documents, the one who signed things without reading them. He was preparing his defense, and he was doing it by destroying her credibility. Ryan didn't stop there. He also told me he had proof you cheated on him years ago, Ryan added quietly. He said you had been unfaithful first and he had forgiven you, but you were rewriting the story now. Marissa felt a coldness spread across her chest so intense she couldn't breathe. She had never cheated, ever. But Ethan had decided he needed a narrative, one where he was the saint and she was the unstable, unfaithful spouse. It was a story he knew people would believe, especially since he had already softened the ground publicly with his dramatic post. But Ryan wasn't calling just to warn her. He had discovered something else, something tied to Kendra. There are financial documents on my wife's phone too, he said. Documents with Ethan's name. Accounts he shouldn't have access to. Money that isn't his. The realization hit both of them at the same time. Ethan and Kendra weren't just cheating. They were working together, financially, illegally, and they had been using both their spouses as shields. That meant Marissa wasn't the only one unknowingly dragged into the mess. Ryan was too. They weren't victims of infidelity, they were potential scapegoats. And Ethan's online victim act wasn't emotional manipulation. It was strategy. It was establishing a timeline that painted Marissa as unstable so that if he needed to accuse her of forging documents or mishandling money, people would believe him. Suddenly leaving wasn't just a symbolic victory. It was a threat to Ethan's entire operation, because she left before he could prepare for it. And now he was spiraling, trying to regain control of the narrative before the truth slipped out. But the final blow came that evening when Marissa received a single text message from an unknown number. At first she assumed it was another relative trying to beg her to return. But when she opened it, her entire body went numb. It was a photo, a screenshot, a scan of a loan document from 2 years ago, one she had never seen before, bearing her signature. Except it wasn't her signature. It was a forgery, a perfect imitation of her handwriting. And the amount borrowed was staggering. Worse, the money had already been traced to an account belonging to Kendra. Beneath the image was a simple message: leave it alone. You won't survive what comes next. That was when Marissa finally understood. Ethan wasn't trying to win her back. He wasn't trying to protect their marriage. He was trying to cover his crimes. And she had just become the biggest threat to his entire facade. For hours Marissa stared at the forged document, her mind racing so fast it felt detached from her body. The signature wasn't just similar, it was identical, right down to the slight curve in the R she had developed in middle school. Ethan had practiced this. He had prepared for this. He had been planning his escape route long before she ever suspected he was cheating. And now that she was gone, now that she wasn't next to him where he could monitor her reactions and manipulate her confusion, he was losing control and going on the offensive. It hit her then with terrifying clarity that Ethan's biggest fear wasn't losing her. It was losing the shield she unknowingly provided for his illegal financial schemes. Without her, the entire foundation of his lies would collapse. He couldn't let that happen. And that meant he wasn't done coming for her. Nadia urged her to go to the police. Ryan agreed, but Marissa knew Ethan better than they did. He wasn't stupid. He was calculated. If she filed a report without a full picture, it would give him time to twist everything, to plant new evidence, to claim she was mentally unstable, like he had already begun telling people. She needed to expose him strategically, in a way he couldn't spin, in a way that placed all of the fraud back in his hands with documentation, timestamps, and witnesses. She needed proof. And Ryan had the missing piece. He showed up at Nadia's apartment that evening with a folder of printed screenshots he had dug out of an backup Kendra forgot to encrypt. These weren't just messages. They were spreadsheets, account numbers, transfers between Ethan and Kendra, and most damning voice memos Ethan had sent her. In one of them, Ethan complained about Marissa asking too many questions. In another, he bragged about forging her signature once just to see if he could get away with it. In another, he openly discussed their plan to use their spouse's credit to open accounts then close them later. Once the dust settled, Marissa heard her own name referenced casually, like she was an obstacle, a tool, something to be managed instead of a human being. But it was the final voice memo that sealed Ethan's fate. Ethan said, "She won't know anything. And if she does, we'll just say she's spiraling again. No one will believe her over me. I've already planted the seeds." That was the moment Marissa felt something inside her switch from fear to resolve. Ethan's arrogance wasn't just disgusting, it was his fatal flaw. He believed he was untouchable. He believed everyone would take his word over hers. He believed she would crumble. But he didn't understand something crucial. Marissa wasn't alone anymore. She had Ryan. She had Nadia. She had evidence. She had truth. And she had every reason to fight. The next morning, Marissa and Ryan walked into a lawyer's office, one recommended by Nadia's cousin who specialized in financial crimes and domestic fraud. The attorney, a woman named Elise Monroe, took one look at the documents and her expression hardened into something sharp and predatory. The look of someone who had just spotted a case she knew she could destroy in court. She told them exactly what they needed to do. First, file an identity theft report. Second, freeze every account connected to Marissa's name. Third, submit copies of the forged loan documents and voice memos to both the police and a financial crimes investigator. Fourth, avoid all contact with Ethan and Kendra. Fifth, prepare for backlash. The final instruction proved true within 24 hours. Ethan's dramatic social media post backfired when police showed up at his house asking routine questions about the identity theft report. He tried to act confused, innocent, concerned, but the officers weren't convinced, especially when he contradicted himself multiple times within minutes. Then the next blow hit him. The financial investigator contacted Kendra's workplace. Within hours, she was suspended pending review after they found large sums of unexplained money linked to an account she shared with Ethan. Suddenly, their sham partnership cracked in two. Ryan texted Marissa with updates as things unfolded. Kendra panicked and tried to blame Ethan. Ethan panicked and tried to blame Marissa. They turned on each other instantly, tearing apart the coordinated lie they had built over 2 years. The cracks became chasms. And then the flood came. The police called Marissa to inform her that Ethan had attempted to file a counter-report claiming she had run off with forged documents, emptied accounts, and mentally deteriorated. But because she had already filed first and because she had a lawyer and evidence including the voice memos, they dismissed his claims immediately. The investigator informed her privately that Ethan's report actually made him look worse because it contradicted his earlier statements. His pattern of manipulation was obvious. They would be digging deeper. Days turned into a tense blur of waiting. But then, one chilly morning, everything changed. Elise called her with a tone so calm it carried weight. "Marissa," she said, "they executed a search warrant at your house." Marissa held her breath. "They found the original forged documents," Elise continued, "along with practice sheets of your signature. Ethan kept them, hidden in his office." Marissa nearly dropped the phone. It was over. He had incriminated himself. That afternoon, Ryan texted her only 2 words, "He's arrested." She sank onto Nadia's couch, her entire body trembling. It wasn't joy she felt, not triumph, not revenge. It was relief, pure, overwhelming relief. For the first time in years, she was free. Ethan's arrest made local headlines within hours, and suddenly all the people who had called her unstable were deleting their comments, retracting their accusations, messaging her apologies she didn't bother opening. She didn't owe anyone forgiveness for believing his lies. She only owed herself a future without him. Ryan texted her one last update. Kendra had been charged as well. Not as heavily as Ethan, but enough to ruin the life she had built on deception. Marissa didn't feel satisfaction about that either. She felt closure. Months later, after the dust settled, Marissa moved into a small apartment overlooking the city. The first morning she woke up there, sunlight pouring across a table she had bought for herself. She felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Real peace. Not the fragile kind she used to chase in a marriage full of lies, but the grounded kind that comes from choosing yourself. Her life wasn't perfect yet. It would take time to heal, rebuild financially, restore her name legally, and relearn who she was outside of Ethan's shadow. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had survived betrayal. She had survived manipulation. She had survived being used as a pawn in someone else's scheme. And when Ethan cheated, she didn't scream. She didn't storm out. She didn't beg. She simply moved out and let him discover, piece by piece, exactly what losing her truly cost him. She chose herself. And in doing so, she shattered the foundation of everything he built on lies. That was her justice. That was her freedom. And that was the ending Ethan never saw coming.